you mind coming back at in 15 minutes? Or actually, I will have Jeannie Lowell send you a text or email you.
And she was probably going to email me. I just thought I'd check in around 3.
Oh, I appreciate that. Jeannie, are you there to hear that?
I am, and that was my intention, was to.
Great, terrific.
Yes,
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jeannie. I'll wait for an email. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, we're back. This is Senate Education, continuing our work on Tuesday afternoon, February 23rd. For those of you who are following our work and for colleagues, we are going to today continue our conversation with the Department of Health, recognizing a couple of things. First of all, that Senator Lyons' committee is also doing some of this work and is certainly more responsible for this work. And we're glad that Senator Lyons is here to help our work. But what we were trying to figure out in this particular case is we have heard that a grant came in for suicide prevention. And what we are interested in hearing about is how that grant will be rolled out and whether or not the funds that we proposed in our letter are adequate and or even necessary, given that that grant has come in. And so the chair of Approps is interested in having us do that. After we do that, we're going to hear from Senator Rahm and Mr. Desmarais a little bit about Senator Rahm's bill, continuing our tour on suspensions and expulsions. Since S84 has been introduced, we thought it would be worthwhile hearing to see its connection to S16. And why don't we leave it there? So, Ms. Stelberg, great to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you. Again, for the record, I'm Elisa Stolberg. I'm the Director of Maternal and Child Health at the Health Department.
Great. And so you understand the situation, I believe, that we're in. We allocated, or we sent a letter of a series of recommends to appropriations, one of which is looking for the Department of Health to partner with the Agency of Education on suicide prevention, warning signs around depression, making certain that parents and families know how to access certain kinds of resources. And Senator Probst wrote to me saying, well, how does this intersect with the grant on suicide prevention? So any guidance you might give to us would be greatly appreciated.
Sure. So my apologies. I don't know how to turn off my phone. I don't know a ton about the suicide prevention grant. It is a joint effort between the Department of Mental Health and also another part of the Health Department, mostly focused around adult, although there is some focus on child suicide prevention. And I'd be happy to get more information for you or connect you with sort of a better spokesperson for that grant. I will share, however, that I feel like the situation that children and youth are facing as a outcome of COVID is really much broader than suicide, and that once you begin to look at suicide prevention, you look pretty narrowly at a group of individuals who are not necessarily very at risk, but I think that the situation in which our young people are faced with right now is actually much broader. And so I would argue that we would want a more multifaceted approach to addressing social emotional health and recovery for students as a consequence of the COVID response or COVID situation. I think Senator Lyons had the opportunity to have hopefully a pretty robust conversation with our partners at the Vermont Child Health Improvement Program on yesterday, I think Monday.
It was yesterday.
I've lost track these days, and really had the opportunity to hear quite a bit from our pediatric colleagues about what they are seeing on the ground with in working with their patients, and also working with school health personnel, school nurses, and school administrators throughout the last year. And I think from the perspective of where we sit at the health department, we would really appreciate the opportunity to look at social emotional health in a whole population holistic approach. We certainly feel like our pediatric health colleagues are a good partner in this work, particularly because Vermont has such high rates of well child visits. The pediatricians are seen as a very trusted group of individuals in which to talk with, and also are going to your pediatric providers fairly destigmatized. And so should we, as we've done over the last year, we've really capitalized on those relationships and those partnerships to help support children, youth, and families throughout the pandemic.
Senator Lyons.
Yes, thank you. And yes, it was another rewarding opportunity to hear about linkages between medical, social, educational institutions. And this is an area that our committee is going to be focusing on. Frankly, I think it's probably appropriate for our committee to do that, given that we've been looking at the medical home and the outreach and sort of the care management piece between medical and social public health intervention and support services. So the value I see here in education is ensuring that information, diagnostic, helpful information for folks who are working with children in after school or in summer camp programs, that people are at least alert to and have some understanding of the symptoms and how to maybe help when they're not extreme, and then to refer when they are. So, and a lot of what we're seeing with kids obviously is some behaviors that are new behaviors and of concern. And then, so I think that between our two committees, we can cover all the bases. But I think moving into the area of the whole suicide prevention piece, and the medical home and linkage, probably we should do that in our committee, but it would be neat if at some point our two committees could meet together. You're going to have to meet in the morning. That's all I can say. But no, seriously,
Yeah.
I think it's everybody is so concerned. And what I heard yesterday about what's going on with children and families is so concerning. It is so concerning. And the plans that are being made with after school and educational folks, they're really good plans. I think having the summer programs and providing some of the fast track money for that's absolutely the right thing to do. I think if we try to do too much, we won't do anything. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly helpful. So what I think, as appropriation, well, two things. First of all, Stahlberg, if you would be so kind as to track down that colleague of yours that knows the ins and outs of the grant, and email our committee assistant, and I suspect Senator Lyons' committee would also, if they don't know this, would be interested in it, How is the grant going to be used? And we would forward that also, if you would please be so kind as to send that to Senator Kitchell. Have that person loop her in as well. I think Senator Lyons is right. Her committee is going to be doing the large lift in this work. And I think her point's a good one, that as we continue to work with our after school and summer program partners, there should be something built in to making certain that those teachers, those coaches, those counselors are cognizant of the warning signs that we're talking about here, and you know what that might look like in training, or if it's just, again, letting people know. But I will I'll look for an email from your colleague or from you. For now, we'll just keep the dollar amount in. It's sitting in approps. I'll loop back to Senator Kitchell saying that she should expect an email from your colleague, just giving some ideas to how those dollars will be used. And they will also probably be pulling you and DOE in to sort of get a better sense of this, to see if and I suspect Senator Lyons as well, to see if we keep it in as is, or if there's a way that it needs to be adjusted. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great. I will follow up right away. I will add that we did a lot of work with the after school and summer providers last spring and summer, and even into the fall around COVID prevention and setup of their communities. And we also talk with those providers all day, every day. And so we have a good foundation in which to work with them. We're organizing something to meet with them about this summer coming up, and upcoming guidance. So I think it would be very easy for us to sort of capitalize or leverage those relationships in order to also be able to provide this other, added element beyond sort of, how to wear your mask and wash your hands, to also talk about social emotional health.
So the best way for us to make certain that counselors and others are aware of this, signs and symptoms of emotional health, can we leave that with you, or is that something that you want us to do something with?
I think so. I mean, we would certainly talk with our partners at DMH, as well as the Vermont After School and other organizations that sort of convene these, and we'd be happy to talk about the best way to get that messaging across. It's certainly on the top of everybody's mind. I know you heard from Holly Morehouse. She's certainly thinking about it. So I think this would be welcome and of interest to the field.
Senator Hooker.
Yes, Senator, thank you. One of the things that I don't want to see lost in this kind of where do we find a home for this, is the fact that you had initially talked about parents being educated to the symptoms. And I'm hoping that, wherever that fits in, whether it fits in health and welfare or in education and, with the health department, wherever it is, I would hope that we can keep a focus on parents also being educated along with the school personnel.
Yeah, I would say that we need a multifaceted approach to reaching parents and families. Certainly, we do that through the medical home. I think schools are certainly doing that. We've done a little bit of that just through our, public health messaging throughout the COVID response, and I know that DMH has done that as well. But we certainly can think about how to keep that message going, and seeing. I think we think of signs and symptoms as being very obvious, but sometimes they're very small or minor, or a shift in behavior that really can be that first sign. And I think seeing it the sooner the better is important.
Yeah, in Senator Hooker, I'm inclined to keep, I mean, our letter has been sent to Approach. They have it, the 500,000 directing to collaborate with AOE and Department of Health to educate parents. So we'll keep that, you know, as is, and we'll see what we hear back regarding how the suicide prevention grant is being used. And I think just if there's any overlap with those kinds of funds. Senator Lyons. Oh, no question. Okay, I saw you unmuted. Senator Perschlick or Senator Chittenden? Anything? Okay. We know you have your hands full. Thank you for all that you're doing. And you guys are on the front lines. So thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. I'll
We'll
be
look for an email.
Yes, thank you.
Jim, my sincere, I hope the farewell was beautiful.
It was absolutely beautiful. It's fine.
All right.
I'm very sad right now, though. So
I know,
yeah.
I'm sure. How long is she gone until?
She lives there. She lives in England.
She does live
Oh,
in England.
wow.
She's an actor, and she's lived there for a couple of years. Yeah.
Oh, all
Where
right.
does she, what part of England?
London. She lives in South London. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. London is awesome.
That was great. We lived there for 8 years, and
Yeah.
she's a citizen, and yeah, it's great.
So my daughter lived there for several years. She loved it. So did we.
Yeah, no, my partner was there for a couple of years, and it was just so great being able to go over once in a while.
That's too darn expensive.
It's way too expensive.
Yeah.
Way too expensive, yeah. But Jim, I feel like I should put out some kind of apology to her, either through Buckingham Palace or through the state Senate. But I hope truly in no way did I interrupt that departure.
It was absolutely fine. No worries.
All right. So thank you. So with that, school discipline, we have a bill that I think we're getting close to moving. And then Senator Rahm was kind enough to
Throw that all in the air.
no, not at all. Was kind enough to put in a bill related to school discipline. And so I think, did you need to get that, Senator? Okay.
No, do you have like a dollar jar that I should Venmo you for? Sorry.
And so before we take any steps, it's important to try to see if there might be a place for this in S16. I know you've talked to Senator Sears. And so with that, I thought what we could do first, if it works for your schedule, Jim, is just have Senator Rahm tell us about the bill, the genesis of it, what you hope to do, and to see if maybe there is a spot where we could place it, given that we have just one more week after this to handle work before crossover. So with that, Senator Rahm.
Well, thank you, Chairman Campion and committee, and I do appreciate you giving this kind of another look before passing it out. And the chairman asked me to be very prepared. So I have lots of charts and graphs and studies at my fingertips in case people want more information, but I'll just really start with the genesis of this, and Jim was there for the play-by-plays. I introduced legislation, I believe, starting in 2014 to try in the House to try and limit the use of suspension and expulsion as a behavioral tool. Being a new senator, Senator Sears and I started talking about collaborating on this issue very early on. And we thought, let's have one bill where we're co-sponsors of more of a, study, and let the schools and districts decide what to come back with and what makes sense for their communities. We had talked about how my being the lead on a separate bill that would really ask us to call this to question a bit more and start limiting the use of suspension and expulsion as a tool, and what we would call excluding kids from school as a way to manage their behavior. once this study started moving, I really didn't want to put out a whole separate bill that seemed to kind of contradict what we were asking the districts to do from outside of the state house. You know, it can be very complicated if you say, we're putting this out as a conversation piece. The few things that I just couldn't let go of and may end up deepening the study component in some way are the experience of suspensions and expulsions, but particularly expulsions of children under the age of 8. And actually, as I was doing my research, what became clearer and clearer is a lot of other states, and maybe the committee's looking at this as well, are actually starting to look at the pre-K experience of expulsion, because pre-Ks, without being regulated the same way as K through 12 education, tend to expel kids at a rate about 3 times higher or more. And within pre-Ks, so within childcare centers and early education settings, the racial disparities and other types of disparities are even worse. So I have some studies that I could share with you to that end, but the pre-K to prison pipeline is a real thing that a lot of states are looking at. But at the same time, that would require a kind of more nuanced approach to this legislation to deal with pre-Ks. So my bill, I believe, which does 2 things, and one is call for us to stop expelling children under 8, would then you'd probably be looking at the data from kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade about how many students are separated from their school because of an expulsion. The challenges, the data that I have from the Agency of Education, happy to share this chart with you, is by grade. So it starts with kindergarten, and you will be able to see, and I can share my screen if it's helpful for folks, that about 10% of our separations from school happen in kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade. And
let's ask a quick question. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering, so by separation from school, that is suspension and or expulsion?
It's both. And all they tell you in these charts is the average number of days of the separation.
Okay.
And that even follows into high school. So I'm sure by the time you get to high school, they much more clearly break out who got suspended for a day or a week, who got expelled forever, who got sent to a different school. But what AOE is currently tracking is separation from school and the average number of days. And so it's fewer days. The average number of days is about 1 that kids from kindergarten to 2nd grade are separated from school, but it's not possible to tell which is suspension and expulsion. And if you wanted to take more testimony on this particular issue, either Agency of Education or in addition, Jay Diaz from the ACLU are the ones who've been tracking this most closely. Jay's on vacation, but even from his vacation, he helped point me to this chart so I could get you, that specific information. And one thing that he added is that based on their work, and we had this included in our 2014 bill to stop expelling children at a very young age, meaning separating them from the school environment, excluding them from the school environment. He would advocate that it's 4th grade and below. That seems to him to be a pretty good cutoff for a very young child who needs interventions rather than exclusion from school.
Do you have a sense, Senator Romm, why students are being suspended or expelled from kindergarten? Please.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
They have elementary school, middle school, and high school sort of broken out of really in all cases, about at less than 10%, and definitely in elementary school, less than 10% are violent in nature. It's a lot of behavioral issues, disruption, et cetera. And then, the whole experience with the 4 to 5-year-olds, the kind of pre-K issues, many have to do with parents not being able to get their child to school on time, the child acting out, exhibiting inappropriate behaviors. But, a lot of it, and that relates to the second piece of this, which is also encouraging the committee to study how truancy is handled around the state. We have some, counties that have said, or districts or counties, because it's a county level issue if it gets kicked up to the state's attorney as a kind of more criminalized issue. But we have some counties and districts that are saying, we're not touching truancy at all in the pandemic. We have others that are very much, calling on families to do better and still sending cases to the state's attorney. So if a school feels like they can't intervene in the appropriate way with a family, or they have sent a certain number of communications out, the case goes to the state's attorney's office. Now, I don't always want to use Chittenden County as an example, but they had a whole countywide task force to say, is there any way we could stop criminalizing families for truancy? And so they looked at a lot of, check boxes and other things you need to do to offer wraparound services to the family before a case goes to the state's attorney. And it's resulted in a much lower number of truancies that get advanced to the state's attorney's office. I have looked at other states. I have some of those charts and graphs available, and where they have implemented statewide interventions before sending a case to the judicial system for truancy, they've seen cases of truancy that result in the criminalization of either the youth or the family. In Vermont, we don't criminalize the youth. We're one of a handful of states that doesn't criminalize the youth, but we still do potentially criminalize the family for truancy, the parents or the guardian. And so states where they've stopped criminalizing the family as well and looked at ways to intervene in cases of truancy, they've significantly dropped the numbers of truancies, the days missed of school, really intervened in the appropriate ways into what that family might be in crisis or might be lacking some key resource that helps them get their child to school on time. So those are the two pieces. Sorry to jump around a little bit.
No, it's helpful. And I appreciate you being here and having a discussion with us, since we are, timing, we're not there, but, we would like to start to advance some things. And I know this is something that the Pro Tem is interested in, and others, school discipline in general, particularly as it relates to, if you will, minority students, and students, disabled students. But one of the things I'm wondering, trying to get your sort of thoughts on is, so if I'm speaking honestly, I worry a little bit, but my committee may completely disagree, that we as a committee would be making sort of that kind of policy decision. And I wonder if it makes more sense for it to come from the Agency of Education. As I mentioned to you, Senator Rahm, on the phone, I'm just wondering, the legislature sometimes in the state sometimes does say never, ever, ever, ever. But I do worry that there are going to be cases where a suspension or expulsion is warranted. What I want to make certain happens is the educational experience continues. But might there be something where a teacher comes to a principal or other school personnel and says, this really does warrant a suspension, even though I know the gravity of what that would mean for the child. Again, just thinking about it, to be sent home as a kindergartner at any age, but particularly young age, suspended or expelled, is something we would want to avoid at all costs. So that's just some of my thinking. And the committee might say, no, perfectly comfortable with moving in this direction as you've outlined. Or do we kind of somehow incorporate it into this overall study that we're looking at, and saying for the agency to come back and make some real decisions for us along this? I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or.
I do, because I can understand the gravity of this, particularly approaching crossover without a lot of additional testimony. I would say, and I'm happy to, work with Jim further on some drafting, but I would say there's three things that the committee could possibly do to strengthen the existing study. Yeah. After doing all this research and really appreciating you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to come back in and keep chewing on this with you all. One, many states are starting to track the experience of expelling children from preschool, even if they have no control over that. They are starting to sort of pay attention and keep track of, which childcare centers are expelling a lot of kids. Is that an experience? And they are seeing huge racial disparities and income disparities in who's getting expelled from pre-K, as you might imagine. when it comes to this issue of what's the right age to just say, we really shouldn't be expelling children. I would love to see the Agency of Education come back and say, here's the age. It's second, third, fourth grade. It's some age where we say, that we really can't find a good reason that we should exclude this child from a school environment, have their whole family and them go through the trauma of, what do you do now? Where do they go to school? How many days do they miss school while they're trying to be placed somewhere else? What does it mean to be in that new school? And then this truancy piece, just sort of adding that for your consideration, because it's sort of another way that we punish families for crises and other things affecting the young person's absence, not behavior in terms of what they do at school, but just their lack of presence from school is sort of often another sign of some kind of distress that we're not intervening with properly or carefully.
Yeah. Committee, questions for Senator Rahm at this point? Senator Perchlik, please.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And thanks, Chair. The question, again, I don't know, it was a question or a comment, but interested what you think, Senator Rahm, is the bill isn't a study that, the one you co-sponsored, the other one. It's a task force to say we will end expulsions for everybody. So it seems like we're already there, but I just reread it and I thought we could strengthen there, because it says make recommendations to end expulsion. So maybe we just say implement prohibition on expulsions or something. But it does say, except for the most severe circumstances or something like that. But I wondered if you felt that was, if you thought we need to change that word, because it seems like taking your new 84 bill and just adding it to 13 is the best way to go, since you're sponsors of both. And if you thought that language that we had in there, because if it was just a study, it seems like we don't need another study. But since it's kind of like, okay, how do we implement this? It seems like that would be the way to go.
Right. This is just a data point of one, but the reason I introduced this bill originally years ago was, really traumatic experiences where a child was, had an accident or did something on the playground and, were suspended or expelled. And a lot of parents of color were coming to me and saying, I don't know what to do. I don't even know if I can live in the state anymore. So, I have seen certainly so much of the urgency and the trauma of removing a child from school. I think the only thing that might balance that out is the trauma of being on the receiving end of some kind of behavior and being triggered by having that person in your immediate presence. And some schools may be so small that there's no way to separate them on a larger campus or put them in a classroom that's much further away. So I really do still try to balance, that experience of, what it means to be a victim. I was saying to the chairman, I was arguing with my fiance about this, who grew up in Charlotte. He was 7 when his friend on the school bus made him spit a spitball at the bus driver, and they both got suspended. And he said it like straightened him out and made him a better person, And then I said, well, what happened to the other kid? He said, oh, he's in jail now or something. So it was like, okay, well, if you have a family structure that says what did you just do, and really intervenes and uses that as a tool, but you can get that intervention without that suspension or expulsion, where another family might say, great, forget it. You're never going back, or whatever the case may be. So hopefully, when these ideas were proposed, a lot of them were in that restorative justice framework of, if you're not going to, expel or suspend a student, what are you going to do to repair harm to the victim of whatever they perpetrated, and make sure they don't have lingering trauma that goes unaddressed, and, help that person be empowered to repair the harm, so that they ultimately take more responsibility for their actions in the future. I know we're talking about restorative justice too, so it's jumping all over.
So Senator Perchlik, you're proposing that, given the way our Q.1 is written, that we, and S84, that we, in a way, merge both of them.
It seems the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Senator Lyons, you want to weigh in?
That was actually a suggestion I was going to make. And then the other question is, Senator Ram, if you have any of the data that you would like to share with the committee to support our decision, that would be really helpful.
Would it be preferable in an email to the committee, kind of as a package of information?
That would be
Great.
terrific.
Okay, great.
That would be great. Senator Hooker, Senator Chittenden, any concerns with that movement to merge these two?
I think I would support that, in that, you know, we have important pieces of each of them, and so put them together rather than trying to do one or the other. And certainly it would make a lot of sense.
Okay, Senator Chittenden. Okay. It's good to have people from Chittenden County on here that you can influence, even though.
Well, you know, I mean,
We're a team. It's a team effort.
Right. That's right.
I do have a question
Yeah.
regarding alternative situations for students who have, you know, perhaps serious issues. You mentioned, Senator Runn, that, you know, a small percentage are because of violence, that kids are expelled. We do have alternative ed, you know, here in Rutland, and I know that there have been some very young children who have been, you know, put in alternative classes. How would something like this intersect with the bill, or the attempt to sort of ban expulsion?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm sure your committee is constantly trying to look at, what does separate but equal look like? You know, whether it's special education or English language learning or alternative programs, you know, is the intent ultimately to help return them to the school environment, or is it a place for them to get relegated for the remainder of their time in school? And if that happens to them at a very young age, you know, then what is the next step? Do they ultimately get returned to the feeder, you know, is that a feeder school back to the middle school or high school, or, you know, do they get sort of left in an alternative program for the remainder of their days? We should have more data on these things. And, you know, we should know, I mean, what we get often as senators is stories that break our hearts, that seem to not add up to, you know, the full picture. And then we know that we're probably not going to necessarily hear the stories when something pretty horrific did happen necessarily. So, you know, better data to know, is it a temporary move to an alternative program? Do they get put back in with the regular school population? So much of the language of these reports about exclusion and separation remind me a lot of special education and ELL, where you could just end up feeling like you're not a part of a larger community for a long time. And that can have a really detrimental effect on your outcomes and your ability to function in society. And you sort of end up on that continuum to feeling like an outlier from society, which is what we end up calling the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. No, I really feel like we're tackling something important here, and we're going to look to your support on the floor when we get any questions. Especially, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, very eloquent committee members. I don't know who's reporting, but I'm sure they'll do better than
I. Senator Chittenden.
Yeah, right. He likes to disappear off the screen.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thanks for your advocacy. We do have about 11 other bills of yours in this committee that we are working to advance. One other in particular, though, we heard wonderful testimony this morning or this afternoon, like 20 minutes ago, from a Mr. Yin from Winooski, who also spoke of the incredible work that multicultural liaisons do. So that's also hopefully something we might be able to package up into, we're hoping, into our miscellaneous bill. So. Senator Ram, thank you for taking the time from government operations. Please remember our kindness when you redistrict all of us.
Just by virtue of this being my second or third visit, I'm biased, but I can tell you're doing really amazing work, and it couldn't come at a more critical time for our kids who are feeling really isolated and lost, and like they need a sense of belonging again. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. And if the press is listening, hopefully they captured that.
You have a great chair committee. I have said that before.
Goodbye. Thank you, Senator Rom. Thank you. Mr. Demarais,
Yes.
I think seems like a very straightforward, even though I'm usually the one that needs walkthroughs more than anyone. I don't know, is there anything overarching that you'd like to say about the bill? It looks like it's the committee's preference to merge the two. And again, it does look pretty straightforward. It does look like I'll need a fiscal note, and I'll request that from joint fiscal before we vote it out. But I am hoping to move this, if at all possible, in the next day or so.
So you want to merge them. Do you want to turn the prohibition on expulsion for students under age 8 into part of the report, the study, for recommendation on that, or do you just want to put that in as a requirement?
The way I'm reading the committee, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misreading the committee, is that we should put that in going forward as a requirement. Is that, I mean, that looks to me, or did I misread and folks really senators feel as though they would like this as part of a study? Senator Pertwee, you made the initial comment, please.
Well, the way it is, maybe we need to change the wording on S16 or whatever the number is a little bit, 18, to say that it's clear that we're ending expulsions except for the most extreme situations. So that includes people under the age of 8. So I don't know if we need to include that specific language in the other bill, but we might want to be clear that the recommendations are basically, here's the new policy. We shall not have expulsions. How does that work in a school? How is each district going to deal with it? Because if you just say you can't have expulsions, I can see just a bunch of questions coming back from every school district saying, okay, well, what about if they bring a gun to school? Or what's our responsibility for those children that we do expel under the extreme situation? So my understanding of this task force, which I don't think we should call it a study,
Right.
The task force is saying, we will not have expulsions. Here's how you deal with, except in these extreme situations. Here's what those extreme situations are, and here's how you implement it. You know, we talk about in the bill about let me get to that language. It's on page 4, I think. Yeah, right. We're asking also to do the data collection and analyzing, but just kind of how they're going to make this happen in every school. Right, to inform strategic planning, guide statewide and local decision
making. Yes.
Yeah, like all that stuff.
Great.
I mean, that's the way I see it. I don't know if that helps. Or
that gives us, you know, that's going to help answer, I think, a lot of concerns out there. Again, that this task force is looking at this and going to be strategizing and working and informing school districts how to work with students of that. Yeah, please.
Well, okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So Jim, do you think that the language where it says make recommendations to end suspensions is ending suspensions, or is it just making recommendations to end them? You know, so like, at what point, if this was how it passed, would suspensions and expulsions end? At some point in the future, and we would need further legislative action, or would this be sufficient?
So you're looking at specific language now in the bill, right? In S16.
Yes.
Where are you looking exactly?
Line 7 on page 4.
Yeah, mine doesn't have page numbers. Let me find where I am. Hold
It's
on.
section 2, the creation of the task force,
Uh,
third line of that task force and school reform report.
oh, right in the creation section. Yeah. Yeah, they're recommending to you making recommendations as to ending suspensions and expulsions, but you would have to take action based on those recommendations and change statute. The statute currently permits these practices, so you have to make a separate change there to implement that.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, you could take Senator Ram's language and prohibit expulsions for children under 8, and then add to the study a line that requires them to look at how school districts could implement that in terms of how they would help school districts decide how they would deal with the fact that they can't expel these kids. So you could add that to your task force if you want.
I'd be for that. And also, and maybe the wording is already enough there to say that, yeah, we are going to end that expulsions for those under that age. How do we implement that? But then also tell us where to draw the line for the extreme expulsions. And I wondered if we need, what I would guess on my point of view, I would like to have it say that kind of it is the policy that for even over 8, we don't want to have expulsions, but maybe we need to draw the line somewhere. I agree what I think the chair was saying to Senator Ram, that there are these situations, like we heard from Secretary France, if somebody brings a gun to school, I think the school should have the ability to say, okay, you're not coming back till tomorrow. We need to figure out what's going on. So I don't want to just say there is none, but somebody needs to figure out where that line is drawn. So.
Mhm.
Well, that's what they're doing, I think, already, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
But-
16 already. Yeah.
I guess it's back. I guess I was reading it wrong to your original question, Senator Campion, is that we do, sounds like we would have to add that language from S84 about the not allowing expulsions under age 8.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to say something like, so the extreme example would be if the individual is going to cause harm to himself or others, him or herself or others, that provides for some protection and allows for decision making. That isn't that that's usually the phrase that's used in a variety of areas. So
Yeah, the potential to harm
yeah,
themselves or others. So they may not have actually done it, but they have a weapon or something like that. Senator Perchlik?
Well, I wondered if Senator Lyons was making that comment in reference to the 8-year-olds and under, which I'm okay with maybe, but.
yes, that's what I'm referring to. You
Yeah.
were looking for the extreme cases. It would seem to me that would be about as extreme as you can get. So, I mean, if it's harm to oneself, then you would want to ensure that the school would have in place some referral system or support system for the kid. And if it's to others, then you want to make sure that the child is home and the family, if there is a family, or the guardian or caregiver knows. So there's a lot of work that schools have to do. And so that I like Jim's suggestion as well.
Senator Perchlik?
And Jim, in this context, in this part of the statute, when it says a student, how is that defined? Is that, to Senator Ram's point about, does that include preschool kids, or does it only,
Preschool is tricky, right? Because preschool that happens in a school is under AOE's jurisdiction. Preschool that happens in a private care center or family home provider is under Human Services jurisdiction. And they have joint rules that kind of cover these areas, but it's not quite clear to me what the expulsion and suspension rules are for pre-K kids in childcare centers and family care homes. I'm not sure what that is.
But is Title 16 only dealing with kind of schools under the control of AOE?
Title 16 in this area is quite complex because it's got joint authority given to AOE and AHS to oversee these programs. But the programs are under, while they have joint rulemaking authority for both, they are siloed in terms of oversight. AOE for in-school, AHS for private centers. So I just don't know the answer to your question about what happens in those childcare centers and home care centers or family homes on this question about how much rules apply to them.
It's a great question. I mean, we're saying, I mean, I'm inclined to think we keep this pretty narrow and it be clear that we're not talking about, private home centers, something somebody has it, a parent might have it at their home. And I think we tighten that up, Jim, to either say, pre-K through, again, 12.
It's under the age of 8, but I can say under the age of 8 enrolled in a school. Right? That'll carve out the private side.
Right. Because school is defined.
Yeah.
Public school. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay.
So am I hearing that you want also to add a caveat to her prohibition to say, except in the case of extreme circumstances?
Such as?
I use the right words, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or use Senator Lyons' language.
Yeah, that's what I think. Senator Lyons
Yeah.
is the way to go.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, well, maybe, I don't know if that other language needs to be changed about the recommendations.
Right. So I think that's, something we have to decide. Are these recommendations that they are going to come back to us with, or are we asking them to, implement a policy? Well, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. Because because suspension and exclusionary policies are in statute, so they can't do anything more than make a recommendation to you, because you're gonna have to go change the statutes to implement that.
What do people think? I mean, I'm trying to think of language. So what would the language be, Jim, if we wanted this to happen immediately? I mean, we're basically saying, no matter what, they're going to have to come back and talk to us, right? I mean, unless we were making a policy that was completely overarching and or bad adjective, but unless we were saying, we're getting rid of suspensions and expulsions right now, any work that's being done in this working group is going to have to come back to us.
Right. Well, this is what calls for. They're going to come back to you.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm just trying to think. I'm not sure if Senator Persick, were you thinking about altering line 7 where it says recommend to end, or to say, or to end suspensions? Either way, it kind of comes back to us. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if that's helpful or.
Yeah, I guess I think that we probably keep it the way it is, and that there are complications, and might even come up with the under 8-year-olds, but that it's better for the task force to look at it holistically and then come back to us and say, like, okay, here's how you need to change this.
Yeah.
It says pretty clear we're going to end it, so they can't come back and say, "Oh, don't end it."
Right. We're directing them that's the way we want to move.
But the task force doesn't have the power to end.
I understand. Right. Yeah.
So all they can do is come back with recommendations.
Right.
Is there a date certain by which it will end, regardless of when the task force comes back? So in other words, the task force could come back with very compelling reason not to end it. And then, but in the meantime, we could say, that it will end. So we could say it's going to, let's just pick a date out of our heads. It's going to end January 1st, 2022, or no, March 1st, 2022. And the task force report will come back January 2022. There's 2 months there for any change to that effective date. Is that something we should do, or do we want?
How does senators feel about that? I mean, that gives it, either way is fine with me,
I'm happy just ending it, but
right?
but you do want the task force to feel like they're actually doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, let's leave it without the date for right now, if that's all right, Senator Lyons.
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then Jim, do you have enough direction, just looking that it's after 4, and I know we have a chairs meeting, and Senator Lyons, you feel free to go when you need to, and I think Senator Hooker, I don't know if you go to those, but feel free to.
Yeah, I'm fine. I can, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. Senator Persichia or Senator Hooker, final
Just a quick
questions for
question
Jim?
to clarify, as far as under 8,
Yeah.
that would be immediate, and anything else would be subject to what the recommendation of the commission is.
I'm sorry, would you repeat the first part of that?
Banning expulsions for
Oh.
kids under 8 would be immediate.
Yeah.
And then the rest would follow as the debt is collected.
Exactly, save for circumstances as outlined by Senator Lyons.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So if Jim, if you'd be so kind as to email the entire committee a new draft when you're done.
Sure.
So it would give people an opportunity to look at things this evening. We could comment some more. And I will ask Joint Fiscal to do a fiscal note. Senator Chin, and I want to remind you, about 5 weeks ago, we were working on this, and it looked like we were nearing completion. You said, well, if sausage making is this easy, it's fine with me. Now we're really into making sausage.
It'll be great sausage.
Yeah, it's going to be great sausage. I like that. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Jim, thanks again.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Senator Perchlik, you're going to stay on?